The NBA's opening week is finally here. Finally. But C.J. McCollum, one of the Trail Blazers' most exciting players, not going to be on the floor when Portland kicks its season off thanks to a suspension for walking onto the court during a preseason game. So take a look here at the video. After Myers Leonard hits this shot, there's a shoving match. C.J. jumps off the bench, starts walking toward them. Now, the team's athletic trainer kind of pulls him back, and there's no doubt this is very clearly against the rules. If you are on the bench, you are not allowed to go onto the court if a scuffle breaks out. Period. That's the rule. And the league has a good reason for this rule. Remember those legendary Heat-Knicks playoff series and the brawl the teams had in '97? The fight started with P.J. Brown flipping Charlie Ward over his head and ended with Patrick Ewing, Allen Houston, Larry Johnson, and John Starks all leaving the bench to get involved. Not a good look, and the NBA suspended them, giving players all over the league a harsh reminder this is not going to be tolerated. We had to show the flip again. We just had to. We saw in 2007 just how important this rule was to the league after Robert Horry hip-checked Steve Nash, Amari Stoudemire, and Boris Diaw. Now, they don't get involved in a fight or anything, even close, but they do leave the bench, and that was enough for the NBA to suspend them both and, yeah, turn that playoff series. So everyone in basketball is aware of this rule. However, there are different ways to apply this rule. And everyone in basketball is aware of that too. During a Hawks-Pacers playoff series just a few years ago, 2014, Paul George and Rasul Butler each take a step or two onto the court during this scuffle, but neither was suspended. At the time, the NBA office was praised, actually, for evolving a bit here, considering the circumstances. Then the same thing happened again just this past spring. A few of the Wizards and Hawks start shoving each other, and you can see Marcin Gortat and Markieff Morris, they're going to come off the bench again a little bit here. A few steps onto the court, you can see them there in the corner, and no suspensions. So what was different with C.J. McCollum this time? C.J. himself isn't sure. Here is his quote. "They could have suspended me for the preseason game. They could have fined me more money and allowed me to play in the regular season game. It's the intent, and it's usually up to them. It's to their discretion." So they had a choice. And CJ is right. The NBA could have taken a lot of other different routes here, and it is time to formalize that fact by maybe actually building in some different levels of punishment to this rule. Sometimes a few steps are the beginning of something big. Sometimes they're just a few steps, and we need adjudication that understands the difference. Ramona, do you think CJ is right to be upset here?
Yeah, I kind of do. I mean, when you watch that again, like, he takes steps, but he's not running, and he doesn't seem like he wants to get engaged in the fight. It's almost like he's trying to see what's going on. And I think you need to have the punishment match, right? So preseason games for preseason game. Regular season game for regular season game, postseason game for postseason game. So now you're taking a preseason game that he really wasn't running onto the court. He just was like window gazing, right? And you're going to suspend him for a regular season where the consequences are a lot more severe.
You know what? In a vacuum, yes, it's an excessive punishment, but punishments exist to provide a deterrent, and this has been an effective rule. The fact is, we just don't see this very often.
Has it been effective? I just pulled up three examples in the last year and a half.
Here's the problem with your proposal. If you start doing ad hoc situations, now the league has to be this, go into the chambers and, well, was he window gazing, or was he walking 5 steps or 3 steps? Now it becomes arbitrary. So I like the rule because it provides a deterrent. We just don't see this very often.
I know what you're saying. You don't see these incidents happen all the time, and I get that, but you're like the cop who's giving me a ticket for going 62 in the 55. Like, I mean, yes, I'm speeding, theoretically, but you don't get a ticket there because you're like 7 miles an hour.
I just disagree. I always disagree with the slippery slope theory, right? We are all intelligent beings. We are able to discern nuance. We are able to decide, hey, if he does a couple things, that's different from if he goes in there barreling, trying to flip someone over his head, for example. I mean, I just think that there's a reason the NBA office does make decisions on punishment all the time.
My issue is not the slippery slope. My issue is now all of a sudden it's going to be situational, and you can't measure the intent of a guy's head.
It's already situational. Look at Pacers-Hawks. Look at Hawks-Wizards.
And even step away from this rule, but like, how do you decide if Draymond Green gets suspended or not? Like, each one, right, in the finals, like, each one is situational, whether you like it or not. And I think we come down to this. In some ways, CJ is a victim of the fact that he's a generally gentlemanly guy. Like, he has not run afoul of the NBA office for a while.
We saw that quote they just threw up there a minute ago, a little bit about, like, my history of violence on the court.
Like,
he's making a joke, obviously. obviously.
if they suspend him, then they're proving to the rest of the league that we will suspend anybody. So it's sort of you're punished because you are the good guy.
I understand his beef. I just think it has been an effective rule, and the fact is we just don't see this very much, and I think that's the reason.
You think the reason is because
Absolutely.
everyone knows that
everybody knows there's going to be a suspension.
That would
That's why
hold
you
more
rarely
if
see
this really
this.
had been a zero tolerance policy. Like when happened with the Suns and Spurs, it felt a little bit like, hey, zero tolerance, right? What happened with the Knicks and Heat, you know why they're doing what they're doing. With the Suns and Spurs, and the Suns essentially lost a playoff series because of that happening, you said, okay, this really is zero tolerance. All right, those guys didn't start fighting and they still got suspended. But then we've seen examples that have been less than zero tolerance the last couple seasons. So why is CJ all of a sudden back under zero
Let's
tolerance?
correct those, not the others.